It's tremendously big and tremendously wet.
Everybody, and welcome to episode 76 of the Ron and Brian podcast. I am Ron, as always, joined by the vice president of the Angela Lansbury fan club, Brian. Brian, how are you on this chilly fall night?
Listen, I'm going to tell you, this is the time of year where I feel that Mother Nature and I become simpatico.
Really? Why is that?
Because right now, Mother Nature is sending the message to you that it is light jacket weather. It is hoodie weather. It is time for your underarms to stop sweating. It is time for the small of your back to be dry. And this is when I feel like I'm in my element here.
Nice.
All right, very good to hear. Can I tell you, before we get started, I want to give myself some credit to show you how dedicated I am to the podcast. Earlier today, I was offered free tickets to go see the All Elite Wrestling show that's going on live at the Liacouras Center at Temple University. I believe Billy made it to their inaugural taping down in D.C. I'm sure some of our listeners will be watching live on TNT tonight. But I said, you know what? I'm going to pass on the free wrestling tickets. Wow. I'm going to do the podcast. I mean, I was excited. Don't get me wrong. Someone came up to me. They said, Ron, we got a free pair of tickets for the wrestling tonight. And I was like, oh, I want to go. And then I pulled out my phone and I pulled up my calendar. And there on my calendar was the podcast reminder. And I said, oh, you know what? Thank God I have an accurately updated personal calendar to let me know where and when I should be. And I said, no, give these tickets to somebody else that will also appreciate them. And here I am tonight, here with you on the podcast.
Following through with something that you promised to do.
You know, I think it's just the hallmark of a good person.
Let me ask you a question here. Is it really the fact that you're a good person, or is it the fact that you are simply following the directions of what you have listed your calendar as being priorities?
I think it's a little of column A, a little of column B.
Because had you not had an updated calendar, you'd be at a wrestling event right now, and I'd be sitting here talking into a microphone by myself.
I very well could have double booked myself and then disappointed you, and I wouldn't want that to happen.
You know what? That only a monster would do that.
Only a monster. Speaking of monster, we got some monster weather out there. Can we head down to the weather center?
Absolutely.
Live from the Doppler 6900 Weather Center on the Ron and Brian podcast.
So, Brian, I know you've been down in the South Bronx. You've been preparing for Game 4, Yankees-Astros. Doesn't look like it's going to happen this evening.
Well, for those fans that are currently inside Yankee Stadium holding their wet ticket stubs, that right now the ink is literally pouring off the page. We are having what I would define as a weather event. Now, I'm not a meteorologist. I'm just, I'm an amateur weather aficionado, which is why you and I invested so heavily, the limited resources that we do have at our disposal. We invested so heavily in the Doppler 6900 because this is not just another rainy night.
It is not. You are in the middle of a nor'easter right now, and what potentially could become a bomb cyclone is what the weather predictions are currently saying.
Now, a bomb cyclone, is that when an ISIS member walks into a gay club in Syria?
No, not quite. It is when a pressure of a system like a nor'easter drops more than 24 millibars in 24 hours.
I once
You're
dropped
asking yourself.
I once dropped 24 millibars. I was in a gay bar in Syria, and I didn't quite understand the exchange rate between the U.S. dollar to the local currency, which is ironically chickpeas. So
Really?
so I walked in there. I put down a $20 bill, and they handed me 24 millibars. And I said, you know what? I'm going to drop this all at once. Drinks on me.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the impact of a bomb cyclone is. It says that it would have the pressure of the equivalent low pressure of a Category 1 hurricane. You could experience winds up to 60 miles an hour. There will be flooding in some areas. So Godspeed, Brian. I hope you make it through. And no word yet as to when Game 4 will be rescheduled.
Well, I thought that they literally just pushed the games back a day.
Possibly, but I haven't.
I thought I read today that Game 4 will now be tomorrow. Game 5 will be on Saturday. So the off day that they had scheduled for Saturday will now disappear.
Interesting. Well, you are more on top of it than I am.
Well, I'm right now at Yankee Stadium. I'm there right now, so it's possible.
You're in the thick of things.
Can I ask for a qualification? What is a nor'easter?
What is a nor'easter? You're asking the good questions. Let me see here. It doesn't really say in the article I'm reading.
Now, does it have anything to do with a nor'easter or Alexa?
I don't believe it does.
Okay,
a very underrated Billy Joel song, by the way.
Was it really?
I don't know.
I just thought it was kind of hokey.
Well, you think all of Billy Joel is hokey?
No, not at all. I find Billy Joel very entertaining. I saw him, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, either. But I feel like that song, like that period of his time was when he was trying to, I think, like kind of be like the everyman voice for the downtrodden. He's kind of picked up the cause of the Long Island fisherman, and it just didn't ring true because it felt like he was just trying to be too much like Bruce Springsteen.
All right. That's fair. I'll give you that. Can we do some drinking here now?
I would love to do some drinking.
Drink of the week.
Na zdrowie!
Salud.
Drink of the week. Sláinte.
Prost.
Drink of the week. Drink of the week.
So you're on the road. You're down in the South Bronx. You're outside of Yankee Stadium. What do you have there to drink with yourself to keep you warm?
Well, I want to remind you that today is episode 76 of our podcast.
That it is.
So there is only one true drink that I should be having, and
a French 76.
No, that is a Sam 76,
Ah.
which is a beer that Sam just recently came out on. I'm currently enjoying the heck out of it. I know you're about to ask me how I would describe the Sam Adams beer, and I would say that it's got a distinct flavor, kind of showcasing the slight fruitiness of an ale with the balanced drinkability of and smoothness of a lager. I think it would surprise people like yourself, a craft beer lover, with its huge flavor and aroma, along with a light-bodied, I would call it a refreshing crispness. Now, the real kicker is that I brought out my favorite pint glass that I brought with me.
Wait, is that your pint glass from Happy Halloween 4 with Broken Goblet last year?
Yeah, I believe so. I vowed that this was a keeper and that I would never use this because it was such a proud memory that I have that I decided, you know what, today I'm going to bust out this pint glass. And here, let me hold it up to you. I don't know if you want to pull in on the camera a little bit, but this is such a beautiful glass, so well textured. Those people at Broken Goblet, everything top notch.
They do the merch right. Nice painting of Pennywise the clown on the side of it. So Happy Halloween 5 coming up
delicious.
this weekend at Broken Goblet. Hope you enjoy your glass, sir.
I'm enjoying the heck out of it. Ron,
All
what do
right,
you
good.
got lined up?
So with it being a little bit cold tonight, this is a cold weather drink that I started to have last season, and I'm repeating it this year. It's a cup of coffee with a shot of Avion espresso liqueur in there. So
You know what?
It gives you a nice little kick.
I am actually going to write that down. So what is it? It's an espresso.
Well, no, it's a regular coffee, but
It's just a regular coffee.
I use the Avion espresso liqueur. Just pour a shot of that in my coffee. Warms you up through and through.
I'm writing this down because I want to try that.
I mean, espresso would be a little small of a cup to throw a shot in, so that's why I go with the cup of coffee.
I don't know that you have as much of a drinking problem as I do.
Probably not, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to get there.
I like to keep my mixtures a good nice 50-50 balance.
Fair enough. Again, if you'd like to give us some ideas for Drink of the Week, some themes for Drink of the Week, go to the website, ronandbrianpodcast.com. If you haven't been to the website, it's brand new. You can really do everything there. You can get to all of our social media. You can listen on various podcast channels to the show. You can purchase stuff from our web store, and please do. You can connect to our Patreon, and you can also send us messages through the Contact Us page on the website, which we'll actually be reading a listener email in a little bit. But first, Witster, you seem a little shocked that we have some listener email.
I love listener email. We don't get enough of them.
I think you'll enjoy this one. So
good.
But before we can get to that, we got to get to racism.
This
Week.
in
Racism.
So we've got our 2-time winner Heather Patton. We had given her a break last week because there wasn't any contenders worthy of taking her on. Really not a lot of racism last week. Well, racism came back in a major way this week. We had a ton of examples we were looking at right there in New York. Brian, Governor Andrew Cuomo used the N-word during a live interview on WAMC radio while discussing racism against Italian Americans. Out in California, TV station KTVU issued an apology after using the racially insensitive phrase "Braves scalped" to describe the Atlanta Braves' loss to the St. Louis Cardinals in the MLB playoffs. In Washington, D.C., a group of 100 students and 12 chaperones from Shelton Intermediate School in Connecticut were thrown out of the National Museum of African American History and Culture after a white student from the school spit on a black visitor. The school's principal claimed in a now-deleted tweet that the student wasn't acting out of racial bias, but the superintendent has stated that the student will be investigated and disciplined by the district. Going up to Canada, Windsor, Ontario, 23-year-old hockey player and youth coach Talha Javed received a text from the father of one of the players on his youth team that stated the father wasn't comfortable with Javed coaching his son because Javed is Muslim. The text message literally says, "I'm not racist or anything, but yeah." Going to New Orleans, Nolans. A high school football coach was fired when videos showing players using the N-word repeatedly during pregame locker room chants went viral. Nathaniel Jones had been coaching at St. Augustine High School, an all-boys Catholic school. 2 assistant coaches were also relieved of their duties. Upper Darby, PA, near me, a few miles outside of Philadelphia, Renee Greeley, a teacher at Drexel Middle School, was caught on video calling a black parent the N-word and accusing him of being on welfare. Rashid Noel filmed the interaction after the pair were involved in a fender bender in the school parking lot. Greeley has been placed on administrative leave without pay while the district investigates. Almost our contender. Again, if you find that article online about Renee Greeley, another perfect example of us saying that you need good video and especially good audio to be considered as a This Week in Racism contender. But instead, that honor goes to an unidentified woman in St. Petersburg, Florida. She was caught on video using the N-word towards 14-year-old Barry Henry while telling him to get on his knees and pick up a gum wrapper that the teenager had dropped on the sidewalk. We've got that audio here.
Nuh-uh, don't even act like that. Pick it up. Find it. Get down on your knees and find it. Get down on your knees and find it. No count, little nigger. That's how you are. All y'all, no count fucking niggers. Walk around here acting like something.
All right, and that video was shared on Facebook by Henry's sister. It's quickly gone viral. Henry admits should not have been littering, but truly felt victimized by the woman's words a little bit over the top there.
So he threw a gum wrapper on the floor?
He dropped a gum wrapper on the sidewalk, apparently in front of the building that this woman lives in.
And that is how this woman chose to respond to that.
When he did not want to pick it up, that was her response.
Alrighty, and I will say that she is Florida in a nutshell.
Especially with that accent.
Yeah. Unfortunate.
So our St. Petersburg racist will be going up against Heather Patton. Heather, again, looking for win number 3. We did give Heather a week off, so just as a refresher as to why Heather is a 2-time champion, here is the audio of her ranting at someone at a CVS in California.
Hate niggers!
Yeah, she's on drugs or something.
No, I just hate niggers! Fuck you niggers! I hate niggers!
It's okay, we're calling the cops on you
I would
because
kill,
you're disturbing
I
everyone
would
in
kill
there.
a nigger, but the law says I can't kill the niggers. If the law didn't say that I couldn't kill the niggers, they'd all be dead. Here's my license plate number.
So,
Nigger, nigger, nigger.
Am I the only one in this room right now feeling uncomfortable?
It's a very cringe-worthy piece of audio.
Oh, is that uncomfortable?
As a little bit of follow-up, Heather has apparently stated that she was drunk when that happened, which, again, we've kind of had this conversation in the past. Drinking doesn't necessarily make you use the N-word.
No.
Unless you use the N-word just in general. And I think that's kind of a common thing with both of these contenders this week, is the N-word easily rolls off of each of their tongues. This is not a rare occasion of them having used the word. Would you agree?
Right. Not only would I agree, but it's also they use it repeatedly. Obviously, our friend Heather goes really hard on the use of it, to the point where, it's like you just said, it is very cringeworthy, but also to the point of that's not a word that you just keep saying.
Right. Especially yelling it in a sing-songing Bill Cosby delivery kind of way.
Right. Yeah. No. Definitely not.
Brian, you are quite the prognosticator when it comes to racism. Who is your pick? St. Petersburg racist versus Heather Patton.
Ron, I got to say this. I think St. Petersburg is bringing something to the table here. To sit there and jump to the N-word simply because somebody has littered and is not picking it up, I think you're looking at a high level of racism. But nothing is going to stop Heather Patton. She is a onslaught. She is German tanks going through Paris in 1948. She is the New England Patriots in 1984 going up against the Chicago Bears. There is nothing that can hold her back. She is a knife that you have just taken out of the oven, being sliced through room temperature butter. Heather Patton takes this, not even close.
All right. Well, the decision is in the hands of you, our listeners. Go to the Facebook page or to Twitter. Vote in This Week in Racism. Heather Patton against the St. Petersburg racist. Before we head out of This Week in Racism, we do have a little Racism Rewind.
Racism Rewind.
So we had covered this story last year out in Portland, Oregon. Jermaine Massey, who had been staying in a DoubleTree hotel there, he had been in the lobby using his cell phone, talking to his mother when a security guard asked him for proof that he was staying in the hotel. Jermaine asked why none of the white customers were being asked for proof, and he was eventually kicked out of the hotel. Well, he has now filed a $10 million lawsuit against Hilton. Massey's lawyers claim there is a systematic racism problem within the Hilton chain and that they have been inundated with stories from other guests at Hilton properties, 2 of which they now represent also. Massey's lawsuit seeks $3 million for his frustration, humiliation, and feelings of racial stigmatization. And he also intends to sue for $7 million in punitive damages. The management company of the DoubleTree has indicated that they might want to settle the lawsuit. The security guard and manager that were involved in the initial incident have been placed on administrative leave and later fired. Brian, merit to this lawsuit or no?
I would say, anything that brings to the surface that there is racism going on in this world, I'm behind. Do I say there's merit to it? Probably not, but is it something we need to investigate? Yes.
And odds are Jermaine's going to get paid. I think this settles out of court. I don't think the hotel wants to go through a long litigation on this, especially since firing the individuals involved is very close to an admission of wrongdoing.
Of course. Now, if this were, what was the guy's name? I want to say Dale. Who was the racist that we had that was working at the Days Inn in Florida?
That was Days Inn Dave.
Days Inn Dave. Now, that's a guy that warrants a lawsuit.
True.
He was Employee of the Month 4 months in a row. There's no reason why they should have let him go. He just had a bad day.
Just a bad day, and it caught on video, and then it all goes to shit.
That's sure a shame.
All right, let's keep it moving.
All righty, let's go. Ooh.
Ron and Brian's Beef of the Week.
I never get tired of that bumper. Never.
I love it.
They were 76 episodes in, not tired of it.
I absolutely
Brian,
love it.
What's your beef this week?
I've only got one beef, and it is going to be quite obvious to talk about. I am beefing over the St. Louis Cardinals this week.
Oof. Did they even show up for their series against the Washington Capitals?
Not at all, but I sure showed up to put $50 on each game with the Cardinals had against the Washington Nationals. I was convinced that the Cardinals had the experience. They've been on the big stage. They've been in League Championship Series won. They have been in World Series and won. Washington Nationals, they had never been at this. They'd never played this deep, not even as the Nationals, but even previously when they were located in Montreal Expos. This team did not have what's needed. I thought that their victory over the Los Angeles Dodgers was a fluke to the Dodgers not being able to handle the big stage themselves. So I sat there and said, heck, let's put $50 down on the St. Louis Cardinals, who proceeded to lose Game 1. I responded by saying, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put another 50 because there's no way they can lose 2 in a row. Then when they lost the second one, I said, hey, there's no way they're going to lose 3 in a row, another 50. And then after Game 3, when they were in the elimination game, I said, there is no way that the Washington Nationals can sweep the Cardinals. So I put another $50 down. I right now am out $225 as a result of the Cardinals being such garbage that they are. I will never forgive them, and they are right now my beef of the week.
It's a good thing you're making all that NFL lock of the week money to make up for those losses.
Well, I was going to say that I'm actually making all the money off the Patreon and our web store.
You know who is very salty today about the Capitals making it to the World Series is it the Washington Capitals?
No, it's the Nationals.
It's the Washington Nationals.
Correct.
So Phillies fans very salty, especially since Washington rubbed it in a little bit that they managed to make it to the World Series without Bryce Harper after they unloaded him and his huge contract. Phillies paying Bryce Harper a ton of money now to not even make the wild card. Mm-hmm. And many people, I forget who it was, pointed out on Twitter that today was Bryce Harper's birthday, so he got a nice present watching his former team make it to the World Series without him being a part of it.
Yeah, that's got to hurt him. That's got to hurt him.
So my beef this week, I've been kicking it around. I had a few different things. I was going to have my beef of the week be people who don't manage their personal calendars properly. But I felt like that was a very narrow beef, and I don't know that a lot of our listeners would be able to relate to that specific beef. Yes.
Can I delve a little deeper in that one?
I mean, I'm saying, like, sometimes you make plans with people and you say, hey, you say pencil yourself in, but you really mean pen, because you really, you have something that you're going to do with somebody, and then they, put something on a wrong weekend and then can't make the initial thing. And then, again, it's neither here nor there. I don't really want to use that as my beef for the week.
Okay.
What I do want to make my beef of the week, similar to you, overall, postseason baseball right now is my beef of the week. And not so much the baseball, but the fact that the games need to adhere to this ridiculous schedule that benefits TV and benefits ratings, that either the games run way too late into the night on the East Coast, or in the case yesterday, when there's 2 games on, the first game starts way too early because most of us are still at work. So Sunday night goes to extra innings, game's not over till after midnight. And then yesterday, the Yankees game started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Which, again, considering the way the Yankees played, I'm fine with having missed it. But I remember, you could watch a baseball game in the playoffs in the evening and still be able to get to bed in a reasonable hour. Now they're trying to work around football and hockey and everything else. I don't know. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, to me, I can relate to what you're saying, and I will tell you what my issue is. First off, I think that the day game concept on a weekday is completely ludicrous, because you are ruling out 90% of the people who are able to watch the game because they're at work. What I would recommend that they do is have both games on at 8 o'clock. Yes, you're competing against each other, but by having a game at 3 o'clock, most of the country is at work and not being able to watch it. So I don't believe you're going to lose too much on the TV ratings. I think my bigger problem that I have is the pace of the game, because the stakes are so high. I think that the players are taking their time, being a little bit more measured and whatnot. But if a game starts at 8 o'clock and it is 10 o'clock and we're only in the top of the 5th inning, I need to go to bed.
Yeah. I mean, some of us have to be to work the next morning. We're not as young as we used to be, where you can just stay up all night watching sports and go to work the next day.
But even the kids, you're going to tell me that, I don't remember when I was a kid that I thought, playoff games, they were over at 11. Now you've got games that are starting. You could easily
watch it and still be able to get to bed and go to school or go to work the next day.
Yeah, you were hurting a little bit, but I think the pace of the game is slow, and it is, I'm going to right now. I've tried to. There have been Yankee games during this playoff series that I've gone to bed in the 5th inning.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And I love this baseball team. I want to watch them. I think they're an exciting team to watch. There, in Game 3 with the Houston Astros, I don't think we showed up to play. But during the Twins series,
to be fair, I think the Yankees were in bed for most of the afternoon yesterday. Also,
valid, very valid.
Well, let's enough about baseball. Let's talk about what we really love, and that's football. Our NFL locks of the week. Brian, congratulations to you again for your picks last week, bringing it home. You realized how much fraud the Cowboys were. You said, no way the Jets lose by 8.5. I don't know that you saw the Jets winning, but I think you pictured a close game, and obviously the Jets pulled that off. And then the Seahawks +2. I mean, I love that pick. That was a gimme. That was very impressive.
Thank you. I just, you know what it was? I had watched the Cowboys play against the Giants earlier during preseason, and I just said to myself, this team cannot take on Sam Darnold.
And I cashed in New Orleans, getting a point. I mean, I knew Teddy Bridgewater has that team running well, even without Drew Brees in there. And again, Green Bay, kind of a fraud, needed the referees to help out. I liked the Lions getting the 4.5. So we remain perfect on the year. So congratulations to you. We'll do our locks of the week in just a minute. But I did want to read a listener email if I can.
Let's go for it.
So we did get a listener email through the Contact Us page on RonandBrianPodcast.com from Scott K. from upstate New York. He writes, I wanted to thank both of you for your NFL locks of the week. I live a relatively meaningless existence. I've worked in the same minimum wage job for over 30 years. It's tough keeping a roof over my family's head, especially with my wife's habit of using 5 cans of Skol each day. Not to mention the money she spent on Charlie Daniels tickets, only to put the wrong concert date in our calendar, so we never got to see him. But thanks to your godlike abilities to predict football games, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I took a bag of empty cans from work and redeemed them for a few dollars, which I bet on your week 1 picks. Since then, I've taken each week's winnings and let them ride on your new picks. So far, I've made enough to upgrade to a double wide and hope to get to a point where I can afford the gastric bypass surgery. I owe everything I am today to both of you. God bless you, Ron and Brian. Well, Scott, you are more than welcome. I'm glad that we are able to help out a listener in need. Brian, kind of heartwarming to hear a story like that, isn't it?
It really makes you feel that what you are doing is helping the world. You know, I know that the stuff that the quality entertainment we're doing is making people's days brighter. But that letter made me realize that we're making people's lives better.
Well, let's try and make his life better, continuing with our locks of the week. Brian, who do you like this week?
I'll tell you who I like. There's a couple games that are really standing out to me. The Jets won last week with their returning quarterback and his mono. I don't think this kid can go 2 games in a row, so I'm going to take the Patriots laying 9.5 points. Also, another team that I bet against last week. I'm coming in for a rebound week. I think the Packers can take the Raiders. They're laying 5.5. So my bets this week: Patriots minus 9.5 over the Jets. Packers minus 5.5 over the Raiders.
All right,
Ron, what do you got?
I am all on the New Orleans Saints train still. They're on the road. They're going into Soldier Field. The odds makers still not respecting the 5-1 record that the Saints have. They are getting 3 points against the Bears. I'm loving that line. I will play that all day and all night. And what else do I like? I'll tell you what I like. I like Daniel Dimes getting back on the horse and leading the Giants to another win. They're favored by 3 against the Cards. I'm taking the Giants minus the points. So, Scott, bet it all and continue to win big.
Now, would you recommend he do a parlay?
I think that's probably, in order to afford a double wide, those aren't inexpensive. So my guess is that he's probably been parlaying some of these bets to really get of those high payouts.
Got it. Because, we're putting out some when we say lock of the week, we're not talking about, those shitty locks that you put on your high school locker. We're talking, this is the kind of stuff that guards Fort Dix.
Right. Speaking of a beef, I had an issue with the FanDuel app that I use to bet on sports.
Oh, no.
They actually will cap the number of teams you can put in a parlay, so you can't do like a 20-team parlay if you want to do some kind of crazy payout, which I wasn't trying to do. I was trying to do a 6-team parlay last week, and wouldn't let me do it.
They wouldn't let you do that.
Sons of bitches.
Now I have a question with the FanDuel app, and you may not know the difference, and I certainly don't know that I want to put this out on a podcast internationally, but would it be possible for me to use the app but put down a non-New York address?
No, because you have to let it track your location for the app to work.
Got it. Okay.
Now, if you were physically in Pennsylvania, I assume you could probably use the app at that point, but you would then need to be in Pennsylvania again to like cash out or something like that.
Got it. Now, this is a specific to Pennsylvania app?
It's Pennsylvania and New Jersey, I believe you can use it in. Because apparently they have to partner with casinos in those states to be able to handle the betting.
Wait a second. I work in Lower Manhattan.
But you're not in New Jersey.
I literally can walk over and take a PATH train, one stop, and I am in New Jersey.
Well, that might work for you. You could give it a try.
I'm writing that down.
Jot that down because you should be making money on these locks of the week like I am and like Scott K is.
Well, think about it. Here's a man whose life really, when you listen to the way he describes it at the beginning of this football season, this was a man that was lost.
Yeah,
there was
completely.
There was no future, and now his wife has plenty of cans of chewing tobacco. I'm sure that now he's in a position where he can afford the correct Charlie Daniels tickets, and he's got himself out of the sleeping bag that he was laid out underneath the underpass, and now he's living in a double wide.
Listen, life is good when you listen to Ron and Brian. I think there's just proof of that.
All righty, let's do it. I love it.
All right, what else do we have on deck to talk about this week? You saw as did I, the new Breaking Bad movie El Camino on Netflix. What was your thoughts?
I'll say this. How do I describe this? I would say the first 15 minutes of this movie, I was thinking that I was watching a Funny or Die video where out of nowhere, Ron Burgundy was going to be cut to in the scene talking to Jesse Pinkman. It did not feel like it was a legitimate drama. It felt like it was it felt weak, and at any point it was going to be pointed out, oh, we're just setting up for the joke. Except the joke never happened. I genuinely would like to speak to Vince Gill, who I believe...
Vince Gilligan?
Vince Gilligan. No, I'm talking about his retarded younger brother.
You talking about the country western singer?
Yes, Vince Gill. I Love America and my shit kickers. Anyway, I'm talking about... I would like to ask him, why was this movie made?
Okay.
What was the purpose? Because if his answer is Netflix wrote a number on a piece of paper and said, we will pay you this, deliver us a 1 hour and 50-minute movie. And I just said, sure. And I scrapped together some ideas. I can understand where he's coming from. But there was absolutely no need for this story.
I would agree with you somewhat. I mean, I think someone had said, it was very much like a fan service type movie, which I would agree with that. I liked it. I didn't love it. I hear what you're saying. I think if nothing else, it really showed how much that TV show relied on the character of Walter White and Bryan Cranston's acting.
Yes and no. And I will, the reason why I'm going to disagree with that comment, if you don't mind and don't take it personally,
Please.
Is I felt that this movie completely lacked any tension. Whereas and you can go back and say, well, it's because of the character of Walter White. But I felt that there were no stakes in this movie. Whereas the stakes in Breaking Bad, almost at least once an episode, it was, is this man's entire life going to come crashing to a halt? This man is about to be killed. How does he get out of this? Whereas this show, basically, and you can say, oh, I'll throw out a spoiler alert, but it really is just kind of like you said, it's a feel-good, what happens to Jesse after the end of the last episode? And that's all it is. And they throw in enough kind of... spot entrances of older characters, some of which I had no idea and didn't recognize, but it just didn't. I did not feel that there was a need for this. I didn't feel that that anything was truly warranted.
Fair enough. Again, it was watchable, but it was good, but I don't know that it was great.
I'm not even sure I would feel that it was good.
And
I think that if.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to just say that when I first started watching this, I said, you know what, I really should go back and watch the last episode of Breaking Bad.
And really, I thought the recap they did at the beginning of the movie was enough to really get you to understanding what was going on in the movie.
You didn't need any prelude to it. It literally is just, okay, so Jesse escapes, and the cops are looking for him, and how does he get out of town?
And I don't know why a lot of people were like surprised that, there was a Walter White cameo in there, which again, it was just a flashback. So I was like, well, of course, if they're going to do flashbacks, obviously they're going to include, the most important character in the entire show. Like, how is that a surprise? Like if we had found out that Walter White was still alive, all right, that would have surprised me.
Right. But half of this movie was a flashback.
Right.
To different, to different scenes with different characters, kind of like to make you feel good of like, it's great to see Walter White again. And, it's great to see Mike again. And, it's great to see the scrap metal dude, hunting down cars and bringing up references to "yeah, bitch." Like it was almost like it was an attempt to feel good, but there wasn't enough of a story here to warrant an hour and a half or hour and 40 or what felt like 3 hours.
And then we found out the day after it debuted, the one character, the guy who plays the disappearer, the one who works in the vacuum cleaner shop, died of brain cancer right after the movie came out.
Listen, if you thought that I didn't like this movie, clearly Robert Forster did not like El Camino. To take his own life tragically the day after watching the movie. Obviously, I'm sure he had, been acting off of, a spec script, had not been given the opportunity to read the entire screenplay for El Camino. I think he had said something where he said to the director, Gilligan's Island, and said to him, I never would have taken this role if I'd known that this was just one gigantic stroll down memory lane. You have ruined my career. I was given a nomination for an Oscar for my role in Jackie Brown. You have ruined my career. You know what? Call it whatever you want, but my time on this earth is over. You have killed me, sir.
All right. It's an interesting take, but I'll go with it. We also
Prove me wrong. I didn't know Robert Forster was in Twin Peaks.
I was not aware of that as well.
I do not recall.
That we learned.
Did you enjoy Twin Peaks? Not to change the subject.
I will be honest. I never watched Twin Peaks. I can't say that I'm a huge David Lynch fan.
I remember it being weird, and I think I was too young to appreciate it. And I keep saying to myself every now and then, give it another shot.
What was that one movie he did? I think it was it Wild at Heart? Was
Yes.
a David Lynch film with was Nicolas Cage in that?
I believe so.
A horrible movie. Just a god-awful movie. The one thing I remember is my girlfriend at the time literally got up and left the theater.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think she felt it was overly violent, but it just wasn't that great a movie.
All right. All right. What I will say is that Robert Forster was born Robert Foster Jr., July 13th, 1941, Rochester, New York, another upstate New York boy. Somebody of your own ilk.
Yes, Rochester, just a scant 4 hours away from Schenectady.
Now, let me ask you a question. Is Rochester where you went to go get sloppy?
I have gotten drunk in Rochester a time or two.
I believe you told a story about that once.
Used to date a girl that went to University of Rochester. She was actually the same one that walked out of the David Lynch movie.
Really? And
there's a little connection for you there.
We've gone full circle.
Yes. We had a holiday this week here in the States. Monday was Columbus Day. Were you off for the holiday, Brian?
Oh, no, I worked.
Okay. Columbus Day is one of those weird holidays. Like some government seems to take it. Some companies take it. Others don't. I just took it off just for shits and giggles. But you seem surprised at the level of controversy around Columbus Day.
Now, keep in mind, the controversy that I've exposed myself to are memes coming out of the African American Twitter.
Okay.
Okay, so what I was surprised with Columbus Day, now, when I grew up as a child, you were celebrating the man that discovered America.
Yes.
This was not necessarily a high holy day, but this was truly an American holiday. As time has gone on, as we have become woke, if you would,
Woker.
there definitely seems to be some recognition that this man did not discover America. In fact, he wasn't the first European to discover America. That the ultimate insult here is that the indigenous people to America, the Native Americans, were here living. That this was not land to be discovered, but had already been inhabited by several Indian nations. So the fact that the white European culture has identified a day to celebrate Christopher Columbus when really it's a slap in the face to the people that were already living here. That was where I followed the pushback on Columbus Day. It seems to have taken a darker turn over the past couple years or so, where now people are accusing him of being a murderer, being a rapist, being a pillager, literally being somebody that is unworthy of being remembered. And I was hoping you had some information that you could share to educate me as to why is Christopher Columbus himself seen as this horrible person?
Well, there's a number of reasons I think people point out. I mean, his use of violence and slavery with the indigenous people he came across. I mean, not just in the States, but also in the Caribbean. He went his first day in the New World, what would become the United States. He had 6 of the natives he came across seized, believing they would be good servants. Throughout his years here, he enacted policies of forced labor in which natives were put to work for the sake of profits. He sent thousands of Taino Indians from the island of Hispaniola to Spain to be sold, many of whom died on the boat voyage over to Spain. Those that were left behind were forced to search for gold in mines and work on plantations. So within 60 years after Columbus landed, only a few hundred residents out of what may have been initially 250,000 were left on their island based on his activities there. There's the forced conversion of native people to Christianity, the introduction of a host of new diseases that had, drastic long-term effects. What else? He was when he was governor and viceroy of the Indies. He oversaw what's now the Caribbean country of the Dominican Republic. In response to some native unrest and revolt, he ordered a brutal crackdown in which many natives were killed. And then in an attempt to deter further rebellion, he ordered that the dismembered bodies of the people killed be paraded through the streets as a warning to other people.
Ooh.
Yeah. So you can see where people might have an issue with that.
At the same time, did we or did we not do the exact same thing at the Philadelphia Soul Arena football game that we went to this past summer?
I don't recall the murders or the dismembered bodies.
I believe at halftime when we were taking a lap around the floor, we saw somebody walking by in a Albany, New York sweatshirt. I decapitated him. You grabbed his legs and dragged him across the concourse looking for the specific suites that were dedicated to the Philadelphia Flyers.
Well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on our memories of that. But yeah, and this has actually been going on in a while. I remember when you and I were in college back in the early 90s, there were protests in Albany against Columbus and Columbus Day. And actually back in starting in 1991, there were cities that started to adopt Indigenous Peoples Day to replace Columbus Day.
Yeah, but I did not realize that it was personal against Columbus. I thought it was more, why are we celebrating a Spaniard who shows up and decides that this land no longer belongs to the people that live here? Why don't we celebrate the people that lived here? That was the way my, and you can say ignorant understanding of the situation was at the time, because that's what I thought we were being urged to celebrate, was the indigenous people that were already here and were living here peacefully.
Well, and I think what you're seeing now is, and I agree, I think, initially Indigenous Peoples Day, was being promoted to celebrate the history and contributions of Native Americans rather than Columbus. But I think what you're seeing now is, there is a pushback from a number of people, especially in the Italian American community, that, feel like Columbus should be, Columbus Day should be revered, shouldn't be taken away as a holiday. And so, I think now you're seeing people being more vocal about, how seemingly awful a person Columbus was, how he was responsible for a number of deaths. I haven't read any accounts of any kind of raping or anything like that, but people feel that he was responsible personally for hundreds of thousands of deaths of Native Americans, of inhabitants of the Caribbean islands that he was overseeing. So not necessarily someone that you would want to celebrate each and every year.
I did remember, and this was something that I remember hearing when I was in college, was that he was immaculate in terms of his use of his calendar. You
talk about a man that knew how to keep a calendar, hold up his appointments. That was a man. He was always prompt, whether he didn't schedule a pillaging on top of, a day when he was going to be parading dismembered bodies through the streets. That would never overlap on Columbus's calendar. So you do have to give him that much at least.
He may have been a terrible human being, but there were some pluses to him.
Yes.
Okay.
Speaking of
human beings,
terrible human beings in leadership positions, we try and go a week without talking about Donald Trump, and yet we can't. We still have the situation going on with Syria and Turkey, of which the White House released a letter that Donald Trump sent to the president of Turkey, which when it first was released, because I first saw it on Twitter from one of the Fox News anchors had tweeted it out, and I was like, this can't possibly be the actual letter. Like, this has to be an Onion article that someone just took a picture of and shared.
This cannot be how the president of the United States communicates informally with other world leaders. Ron, would you be willing to read this letter?
I would love to.
In your as Donald Trump.
I will try. It's always an impression that's a work in progress, but we'll try it again.
Now, can I set you up on this?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to intro you.
Oh, all right. I like an intro.
All right. So this is the letter, and I'll let you take over when it's your time. The White House, Washington, October 9, 2019. His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey, Ankara. Dear Mr. President.
Dear Mr. President, let's work out a great deal. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, and I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkish economy. And I will. I've already given you a little sample with respect to Pastor Branson. I have worked hard to solve some of your problems. Don't let the world down. You can make a great deal. General Mazloum is willing to negotiate with you, and he is willing to make concessions that they would never have made in the past. I am confidentially enclosing a copy of his letter to me, just received. History will look upon you favorably if you get this done the right and humane way. It will look upon you forever as the devil if good things don't happen. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool. I will call you later. Sincerely, Donnie. Now, you would think, when we did our Donald Trump transcript call, we possibly embellished some of that transcript a little bit.
Correct.
And you may think we're embellishing this letter, but that is 100% the verbiage in this letter.
Let's work out a great deal. Man, it's just ludicrous. He's obsessed with what he feels is negotiations and coming to agreements. I mean, it really is an interesting window into his soul, because the way this is written, it genuinely comes across as if he is dictating this to someone who, at the end of it, says, so would you like me to paraphrase what you've said to me into a letter? And Trump's response is, no, I want you to write exactly word for word what I just said to you.
And who uses "I will call you later" in a letter? Like, how do you know when the person is going to read the letter? It's not like it's an email. Like, if you're sending an email, like, I will call you later. But it's like, I'll call you later. I'll have to wait 3 days because this is going airmail. And then I'll assume you read it over dinner, and then I will call you.
What is the reference to Pastor Brunson? Now,
I don't know.
I know Pastor Brunson was a political prisoner who was held in Turkey for 2 years and was released a year ago. But I don't understand, what did Trump do to Turkey as punishment for it? Because I don't see any references to that whatsoever.
Yeah, and from what it sounds like, Turkey is not. I mean, the Middle East in general is not intimidated by the president or the United States in any way at this point.
And not just this president, but I don't think they've been intimidated by any American president. I think that they feel like we have no standing in that area. They want to take us for our financial aid, so they will placate our egos to certain extents. But ultimately, I do not believe that anybody in the Middle East is afraid of America.
No, I would agree with that at this point.
Now, I'm going to throw my hot take here, which may not be popular, but I actually agree with Trump that we should be pulling our troops out of northern Syria. What we should not be doing is just rolling the dice and announcing in the middle of the day, oh, by the way, we're going to start pulling our troops right now, because it is just a chaotic environment and situation. This was something that should have been negotiated, prepared for. There should have been, contingency plans for who was going to fill the vacuum. He literally just sent out a tweet at 6 o'clock one evening, we're pulling our troops out, and troops were pulling out within hours.
Right.
And that is where I think his naivete is in terms of the consequences to his decisions. I don't think he understands that 100,000 people have lost their homes because of what he's just done. I don't think he understands the significance that Russia has now become the world police in Syria. I don't think he considers the implications that our allies, the Kurds, who supported us in our war against ISIS, that by turning our back on them, immediately befriended, what's the guy's name in Syria? I want to say Bashar Assad. They immediately now formed an alliance with the very government that they have been fighting against, just so that they are not slaughtered by the Turks. And I don't think he understands the havoc that has been wreaked in that land, because he's just decided, oh, we need to pull our troops. And here's the real kicker, is that there are troops who have been quoted as saying, this is a stain on America's reputation. Nobody will ever take our side again.
I think we also need to consider the possibility that, he did consider it and he was aware of it and just didn't care because he's beholden to interests other than those of the United States and its allies.
Whose interest do you think he's beholden to?
I mean, if you listen to Nancy Pelosi, all roads lead to Putin.
See, I disagree with that. I think here's a guy who was on the phone. I mean, he had a phone call with Turkey's leader, and the next day announces we're pulling out all of our troops. I think that if the transcript of that call comes out, it is Erdogan from Turkey sitting there saying, hey, Donnie, wouldn't it be great if you could say, to all these families, hey, I'm bringing the troops home, and, we'll just, create a little safe zones for us. And he's like, yeah, that's great. I will be heralded a hero that I'm finally bringing the troops home. And I don't think he understands the rage and anger at him for what he's done.
I mean, even Lindsey Graham has been speaking out against him, which, Lindsey's been one of his obedient little lapdogs over the last 2.5 years.
Speaking of lapdogs, Trump is losing the support of the evangelical Christians.
Finally.
Who are sitting there, bewildering why we have turned our back on Kurds. Like, there's the, the Great Wall of Trump seems to, there seems to be some pieces of wall crumbling down. Does it completely topple? I can't predict it, but it certainly doesn't look like the kind of wall that we want to build on our southern border with Mexico.
The most recent poll taken shows that now 52% of Americans are in favor of impeachment. To put that in context, only 34% of Americans were in favor of impeachment when the GOP started an impeachment trial against President Bill Clinton. And who else? Nixon was at 58% prior to his resignation, but that was his highest polling. He had been polling below 50% before it jumped up, and he was like, I need to get the hell out of here. So we'll see. Also, more insanity. If you're familiar with the Dunn family, this is a family over in the UK. Their son, 19-year-old Harry, was a motorcyclist who was killed by an American diplomat's wife, Anne Sakulis. She was driving on the wrong side of the road over in the UK. Hit Harry on his motorcycle, killing him. And rather than stick around and face justice, she left and came back to the United States. The UK reached out to Donald Trump, asked him to send her back. He, of course, refused. So the Dunn family was in D.C. today to drum up support to try and get Sakulis sent back to the UK. They received an urgent invitation this morning from National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien to visit Donald Trump last night.
No. It wasn't to visit Trump. It was to visit a senior official.
Right.
So they showed up to the White House having no idea that they were going to meet Donald Trump.
But then they got to meet Donald Trump.
And what did Donald Trump do for them? I imagine as a parent to some incredibly successful children of his that he is so proud of, and one that he wants to have sex with, I imagine that Donald Trump really embraced them as parents going through a tragedy and was really considerate of the loss that they are feeling and really set them at ease.
Well, he did to the Dunn surprise. Donald Trump did meet with them. Mrs. Dunn mentioned that she had a very nice conversation with President Trump. He seemed very contrite, but that then went south very quickly because Donald mentioned to them that Mrs. Sakulis, the woman that had killed their son, was present in the building in the very next room, and he wanted to bring her in to meet with them. Of course, with a pool of photographers there. And they said in no uncertain terms no, that they were happy to meet with her. They were happy to listen to her apology, but they would do it on their terms, and they would do it on UK soil. And Mr. Dunn had a comment blaming National Security Advisor O'Brien, saying, quote, "It struck us that this meeting was hastily arranged by nincompoops on the run, and in particular Mr. O'Brien, who appeared to be extremely uptight and aggressive and did not come across at all well in this meeting, which required careful handling and sensitivity."
Yep. Once again, go figure. We have drained the swamp in Washington and replaced it with incompetence.
That's just some insanity right there.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
So let's do our own little To Catch a Predator segment. We've got some interesting stories here in that vein. Don't worry, we're not catching you, Brian. We're gonna keep those secrets well hidden.
Whew. I thought we were gonna do this on the Patreon.
No, we'll do this one for free.
All right, listen. This is the kind of stuff. If you're gonna listen to our Catch a Predator segment, not involving me, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I want you to know something. This is the type of quality entertainment that we are putting out every week on our Patreon for our loyal subscribers. There are multiple tiers you can come in at: the $5, the $10, the $15, the $50, the $100, the $1,000 per month diamond level, limited to 10,000 subscribers. Do not miss out. We are giving you right now a peek into the kind of entertainment you're currently missing if you are not a Patreon subscriber.
All right, well, our first story is out in Southern California. There's been a lot of instances lately of teenagers trying to capture older men on the internet that are trying to meet underage girls for sex.
I know it?
There was a group of teens, two 17-year-olds and an 18-year-old, who had been using a social media application to communicate with 32-year-old Robert Dreyfus, who apparently had been targeting underage girls for sex. After texting for a while, the group and Dreyfus agreed to meet at a Starbucks. They were going to try and get him to turn himself in. Dreyfus managed to talk one of the 17-year-olds to get into his car and talk. And what do you think happened?
I would say that she was kidnapped and potentially killed.
He immediately drove off. Thankfully, he only drove a few miles, before he pulled over and let the victim run off. So he probably panicked, committed some light kidnapping, but thankfully released her. But he has been arrested, charged with kidnapping, sending harmful matter to a minor, and communication with a minor for specific offenses.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the sheriff's department reminds people not to take the law into their own hands, not to set up meetings, kind of leaving those kind of things to the police. If you do come across a sexual predator, maybe clue them in and let them take care of it.
I would agree with that. And to adding on to that, coming out of Florida, Hernando County. Have you ever been to Hernando County?
I can't say that I have.
All right. Well, Austin Altman, 22, arrested last week after admitting to police officers that he drove to Pasco County to meet with a 10-year-old girl that he had met on Snapchat. He drove her back to his house where he allegedly held her down with his hands on her throat, sexually assaulting her, even though she told him to stop at least 4 times. Finally, he allowed her to go. She ran to the police. Keep in mind, this is a 10-year-old girl. It's just disgusting. Deputies interviewing Altman said he admitted to meeting the girl on Snapchat, picking her up, and raping her. So
now,
if you are a teenager thinking that these are somewhat creepy men but altogether harmless, no. These are dangerous scumbags.
But now both of these men, they drove, correct?
Yes.
Well, they, I guess, are not as hardcore as one Tommy Lee Jenkins. The Indiana man walked 351 miles to Wisconsin to have sex with a 14-year-old girl who turned out to be an undercover cop.
Oh.
So he faces charges of using a computer to persuade, induce, or entice a minor to engage in unlawful sexual activity. Man, there are some very specific charges you can come up with these days.
Oh, absolutely. And the way I see it is, it's really just a way for him to bulk up, the case, the stack the case against the guy. But to sit there, I mean, can you imagine how badly your feet must hurt after you finally show up?
Well, apparently he would occasionally bike or catch a bus along the way.
Oh, that doesn't count.
But he did, along the way, without realizing he was communicating with police. He thought he was communicating with a 14-year-old named Kylie. They exchanged lewd messages. He texted her that he wanted to, quote, have 500 kids before we are with God.
No.
That's a lot of kids.
Not only is that a lot of kids, but that's enough to scare me away from someone.
Yeah. So he faces a minimum sentence of 10 years in jail, up to a life sentence. He was previously accused of sexually assaulting young children and was sentenced to 4 years for probation for 4 counts of child abuse back in 2012.
Well, let's hope he stays off the street.
I mean, I think a life sentence is good for that guy.
I would agree with you.
And then one last.
We really know how to sell the Patreon to our to non-subscribers. I mean, holy cow, did we just throw out some dark, ugly stuff?
That's the kind of content people are missing. Well, let's finish it on an upwards note. Who doesn't like strip clubs, Brian?
I would say uptight, evangelical white women.
Fair enough. But come to find out, there was a university professor from Philadelphia who spent nearly $200,000 of federal research dollars at strip clubs in the city of brotherly love. Apparently, he was a professor at Drexel University, which settled a lawsuit on Monday with federal prosecutors to pay back $190,000 of it. The bills racked up by the professor included topless bars such as Club Risque and cheerleaders in South Philadelphia. They were spent at the clubs over a decade from 2007 to 2017. So that's
a lot of singles.
A pretty impressive con that he had going on. When he was confronted with the improper spending, he resigned and agreed to pay a little over $55,000. He also apparently spent money on cars and restaurants and things of that nature, but the bulk of the money spent on strip clubs. Can you imagine what kind of deviant would need to drop that kind of cash in a strip club?
I would say it's somebody who really enjoys the idea of flashing money around. Now, are you familiar with either of these establishments? Cheerleaders and Club
possibly
Risque?
am aware of both, yes.
Now, would you be able to describe, based on your conversations with coworkers who have patronized these things, what are we talking about here?
I would say...
how is he likely spending this money?
Club Risque is more of a gentleman's club type format, so probably some champagne courts, some bottle service, whereas Cheerleaders is more of your traditional strip club. Probably spend most of your money on lap dances there.
Got it.
That's my unprofessional opinion.
Now, do you think that at either of these clubs he had run out of cash in the middle of a dance and had to be escorted over to an ATM machine with the stripper to oversee him taking out $500 to pay her off?
I mean, word on the street is that's possibly could have happened.
That's a straight up, that is not a pro effort.
Not at all.
I mean, this guy's rolling in with thousands. He's there to party.
But again, if you're spending federal money, I guess maybe you don't care what those ATM surcharges are.
Well, I would imagine you just want to make sure if you're dealing with the federal government, I mean, you need to provide receipts.
You would think so.
I would say so. Now, do you think he hung out with Cosby at any of these moments? Like, do you think 190 of it was spent on Quaaludes?
There could have been some narcotics involved in the situation as well.
Quite possible. Philly is out of control.
I'm telling you, it's a madhouse here in Philadelphia.
Gotta love it. I love that town.
All right,
love to go. I would love to visit Philly. I mean, it's been so long.
You know what? You should really try. You should really try and get a visit to Philadelphia on your calendar.
You know what? I'm going to check my calendar and find a weekend where I have absolutely nothing listed on my calendar, and I say let's schedule a visit.
Don't double book yourself, my friend.
Wow,
that's a rookie move.
That is a rookie move. Only bitches do that.
All right. Well, we thank all of you for joining us on the podcast. Thank you to Scott K. for your email. As always, if you folks want to reach out to us, go to ronandbrianpodcast.com. You'll find our email, our contact us page, links to all of our social media, so you can go to Facebook or Twitter to vote on the This Week in Racism poll. And obviously, you can listen online and join our Patreon from the website, ronandbrianpodcast.com. Brian, do you have anything else for the good of the cause this week?
The only good that I have left in me is to sit there and share my love for you.
Oh, I love you too, my friend. Let's roll on out of here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Listen, rate, subscribe, and review. We'll catch you next